Hey everyone, this is Noah from Knights of 67, and this will be the second part to my WoW discussion video of Is Mists of Pandaria a bad expansion? If you have not seen part 1, there will be an annotation in the corner of the video you can click, so feel free to watch it if you have not. And that first part of the video covers negative thoughts and criticisms on Mists of Pandaria and why maybe some people have left the game. And the second part covers positive things about Mists of Pandaria and things that can be built off of and everything like that. And then at the end we'll I will tie together both, and from there we will deem if Mists of Pandaria is truly a good, bad, whatever expansion, and that will kind of tie in a little bit to perhaps the next WoW expansion, which is just about a week away from being announced. Well, a week and a half or so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the positives of Mists of Pandaria. So one positive thing that comes to mind when I think Mists of Pandaria is just how fast they've come out with content patches. I mean, you look at patch 5.0 when Mists of Pandaria first launched in September of 2012. 2 months later, they already had a content patch out in 5.1. And, it just was filled with all kinds of monotonous daily quests and everything like that. But, it worked. It was another patch, and, if you hadn't downed raid bosses or whatever, and you still had to complete Heart of Fear or Terrasen Springs or Mugushan or whatever it was, you could do it. And you didn't have to worry about, the next tier coming out and everything like that. And then, again, patch 5.2 came out. So they've had this pattern of coming out every about 3 to 3.5 months with a new content patch in Pandaria. I mean, you look at Pandaria is just over a year old. It wasn't even a year old, just barely not a year old when patch 5.4 came out about a month ago. So, I mean, that's a lot of content patches in just barely less than a year's time. You have 4 major content patches. I mean, that's more than Cataclysm had over its entire lifespan, or just as many as Wrath of the Lich King had, I think. Maybe even more than Wrath of the Lich King. So Pandaria has definitely had the most content. It will finish with the most content patches out of any expansion, whether it be Burning Crusade, Wrath, or Cata. And that's just definitely a step in the right direction, because I feel like, with an MMO like World of Warcraft, I mean, really, in vanilla you had like 12 major content patches, and like in expansions you've probably had like that many combined throughout all of them. So naturally expansions are not going to last all that long, I suppose. But I mean, this kind of isn't necessarily a positive thing, but more just critique for Blizzard. And that is, I think that they could do a better job of perhaps coming out with even more than 5. Because you look at, by the time patch 5.5 comes out, it will probably be about, probably like January, maybe. Possibly December. But you look at that, and that's all the patches that Mists of Pandaria has to offer, to our knowledge anyway. And then you have essentially a dead period between 5.5 and 6.0, and from there, you have to wonder, is it going to pull a Cataclysm again, and is it going to have some of its player base just kind of drop off the face of the earth until the next expansion comes out? Because that's not necessarily healthy for a game. You don't like to have your player base leave and then come back for like a new thing. If I was a game company, if I was Blizzard, I'd want my players to always be engaged in the game and always be involved and ready to go and building towards the next expansion, rather than just and that's another thing perhaps that could perhaps be a negative of not just Mists of Pandaria, but just all expansions really, is just the way they transition from expansion to expansion. And another reason why perhaps people may not be involved towards the end of expansions is just people look at it and they go, well, what's the point? I'm gonna get all this epic gear from Siege of Orgrimmar, and then next expansion it's going to be useless because I'm going to replace it with greens and blues from the questing areas and dungeons or scenarios or whatever. And that's a very valid point, and that's been a problem with just every expansion, even Burning Crusade, you know? I mean, you had like tier 3 in vanilla, and then it's like, oh, kill 10 demons, and you get like a blue that's like as good as it. So, you know, that's been an issue throughout WoW's lifespan, just as a whole. And I know this video is supposed to be about the positives, but I gotta do this while I'm thinking of it, because I don't script these things, so whatever comes to my mind I say it. But you know, again, you know, with the positives of Pandaria is just, you know, how much they've come out, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. And for the next expansion, I would like to see maybe like 6 or 7 major content patches, because I just want to see more of a lengthy, you know, thing. You know, I want to see more of a lengthy expansion, because you look at Cataclysm was the shortest expansion period ever at like a year and, well, almost 2 years, like a year and like 10 months I think it was, or something like that. You know, which isn't like incredibly short. I mean, that's going on about 2 years, but I'd still like to see expansion stretch just over that two-year mark. There's only been 2 WoW eras that have exceeded 2 years, and that's been Vanilla and Wrath of the Lich King. And Wrath of the Lich King really didn't even have that many content patches either. I mean, what, that had like 3, maybe 4 content patches? So, I mean, that's really like even less than Mists of Pandaria. I mean, they didn't come out all that often, but you didn't see people dropping off the face of the planet of Wrath of the Lich King. It was a rise in subscriptions over the course of that expansion. So you just gotta kind of wonder, and again, that's why at the end of this video I'm gonna kind of, you know, theory craft a little bit as to why the hell people are leaving the game, because it can't be because of content patches or lack thereof. You know, it just can't be, because then people would have left by the boatload in Wrath of the Lich King, and even in Cataclysm more than they did, and that didn't happen in either of those expansions. Yet it's happened in Mists of Pandaria. So, you know, again, just something you should think about as we come to the latter half of the discussion here. And again, tied in with this content thing, not only have they come out with content pretty fast, I think, and at a pretty efficient pace, but I think also in the patches themselves, the general content of this expansion, in my opinion, has been phenomenal. Especially in comparison to, say, Cataclysm. I mean, Cataclysm didn't have, you know, that bad of content, I suppose. Not as bad as people said it was, except for 4.3, because, god damn it, Blizzard 4.3. Anyway. But, you know, I think the content in Mists of Pandaria has been very well executed. I really liked the 5.0 raids, and I did like how they went about it, how they released, like, Mugushan Vaults, and then Heart of Fear, and then Terrace. And, you know, I really like the legendary quest that they've had throughout Pandaria, that it's a continual thing. It's one conjoined story, and you keep building your hero's power and power through each patch, defeating each boss, and, you know, making your hero that much more powerful for the final fight ahead, and what we can deem as the next expansion. I would honestly like to see the legendary items and stuff kind of be, like, thrown into the next expansion. Like, maybe Wrathion stays with us the next expansion and upgrades our already legendary items into, like, super legendary items or something. I mean, that'd be kind of cool. I'm kind of like throwing next expansion things in here again. I mean, what I think of as a cool idea, I just say it because I don't script these videos. But anyway, sorry to keep coming off topic here. But, you know, the content of Mists of Pandaria has been very good. And you look at, and another thing, going back to Cataclysm, is in the last 2 content patches of Cataclysm, you had Firelands, which was 7 bosses, and you had Dragon Soul, which was 8 bosses. You know, that's just 15 bosses throughout 2 major content patches. I mean, that's not nearly enough. You need, in my opinion, you need at least 10 or 11 bosses in a raid tier, because I think raids are supposed to be very large in scale, and we've seen that with Throne of Thunder and Siege of Orgrimmar. You know, you go from 15 bosses over the course of the last 2 of Cataclysm to 27 in the last 2 in Mists of Pandaria. I mean, that is huge right there. That's 12 more bosses. That's absolutely monumental. That's enough for a whole nother raid in its entirety. So, that, again, I mean, when people want to argue that, like, I've seen people argue that, like, Cataclysm was even better than Mists of Pandaria, and to those people, I just think, objectively, it was not even close. I think Pandaria has been a much, 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 much more better expansion than people, have it out to be. I mean, I think from the get-go, this expansion kind of had a rough time of it, because from the very get-go of the release trailer, everyone was 50-50. People either loved it or hated it so much. And so I think this expansion just kind of got off on the wrong foot from that. And, no matter how good the expansion has been, people will always find something to complain because they just don't like the general idea of going to Pandaria or the Pandaren people, and they think it should be intertwined in perhaps another expansion or something. And I could see that perhaps, but I really don't think the idea of Pandaria itself is that bad. The one thing I will say is that Pandaria as a whole has been rather pointless. And I'm not talking about the expansion Mists of Pandaria, but just the land itself and the story being there. Because, we were there in the beginning, we were there from 5.0 to 5.2, and then after that, it starts to escalate to like a Horde and Alliance war type thing. Whereas, I mean, that was intertwined with Pandaria in the earlier patches, but, so it's been like, it's been like two different main ideas, and honestly, in the end of bringing down Garrosh, like we necessarily didn't have to go to Pandaria at all. Like, what did going to Pandaria accomplish? Nothing, really, in the grand scheme of things. So, I mean, that's one argument you could make, I suppose, but I don't really think it's worth harping on about. I mean, it's just, to me, that's a little nitpicky thing, I don't think that's something that you should necessarily, say, oh, this is a shit expansion because of this. And honestly, for me, story is what makes me want to play video games. If a video game has a shitty story, if its gameplay is good, I will enjoy it, but if it doesn't have a good story with that gameplay, I will get bored of a game rather quickly. I need a story to motivate me to play a game. I really, really love video game story, and as long as the story of World of Warcraft is good, that's enough for me. And again, I'm biased, because, I mean, this is my opinion here, but for me, the storyline of Pandaria, yes, it's had some plot holes, but it hasn't been nearly as a colossal mess as Cataclysm was. That was all over the place and made absolutely no sense. At least Pandaria ends in a, semi-understandable way, not overly cliche, I suppose. I mean, it was pretty cliche, but I mean, not that bad. It wasn't like Lord of the Rings ripoff bad, okay? You know what I'm talking about, Cataclysm. So I don't think Mr. Pandaria's been nearly as bad as people have said it be. The content, again, as I have said, has been really good. A ton of bosses, Throne of Thunder, 13 bosses, Long Siege Orgrimmar, 14. So I think that's huge. I love having huge raids like that. Siege Orgrimmar may be the biggest raid we've ever had in World of Warcraft, if I'm not mistaken. And that's huge. And I love that. I love huge raids. Give me something to journey through. And again, the journey thing of World of Warcraft is something that I would like to touch up on at the end of this video. So again, to reiterate on the positives of Pandaria, the ones I've listed are just how fast the content has come out, the extent of the content, and just, how good it's been, in my opinion. Overall raid experience, raid bosses, and legendary quest being, a continuous thing throughout the expansion. Those to me are the positives, and to me those positives are very, very strong. So with that, that will bring an end to what I would like to list as the positives. So now I would go ahead and I will combine my negative thoughts and the community's negative thoughts to my thoughts and the community's good thoughts, and just kind of formulate them together and give you my general opinion on Mists of Pandaria and why people don't particularly like this expansion. And just wow, really in the last like 4 years, really, So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. So again, here I'm going to kind of combine my thoughts of good and negative, and see whether or not Mists of Pandaria is a bad expansion or not. Now, again, this is my opinion, but I think Mists of Pandaria is a pretty damn good expansion. Yes, it's had some things like the daily quests that we've covered, the monotonous daily quests, aspects of Raid Finder replacing heroic dungeons, and scenarios also replacing heroic dungeons mixed in there. It's kind of ironic that the Cataclysm slogan was "A new era has begun," because I feel like both in the sense that WoW, well, Blizzard was trying to separate, the game from its former success, which I think was definitely necessary. And so it's a new era in that sense. But also, I think just from a gameplay standpoint, I mean, the game isn't even really remotely the same. Other than the art style, the characters, and everything like that. I mean, WoW is a completely different game than it was 9 years ago, and that's just something we have to come to grips with. And I think that's something the community has had a hard time letting go, is the old times, and I think nostalgia kind of glorifies them. But I think it's good on Blizzard to leave the past to just what it is, the past, and keep moving forward, keep making WoW unique and diverse, and change it. And that's just another thing. It's just people just don't like change, and WoW has changed an awful lot over Mists of Pandaria. And the topic that I would really like to cover, that I've said that I will that I will cover at the end of this video, is why exactly has 2.3 million people jumped ship, so to speak, from World of Warcraft. Some people would tell you content. I'd say that's rubbish. I'd say it's not true. From other standpoints, people would say, well, the game's too easy. There are too many types of difficulties. It's a casual game. All this different stuff. People would say the storyline and all that stuff. And it may be different reasons, for each person. Of course it is. I mean, each person is different. Each person has left the game for one reason or another. I mean, hell, some people probably just left the game just because they don't have time to play the game anymore, not because of anything the game has done. And so, from that standpoint, I don't think I'm all that certified to say why 2.3 million people have left the game, because there are probably numerous reasons. But I think one reason as to why maybe the subscription base has gone down, and why players have been dissatisfied with the past 2 expansions, both Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria, is perhaps this reason that I'm about to tell you may not be as immediately obvious as, say, something more tangible in WoW, like the actual gameplay or content or whatever. And that is, when you look at World of Warcraft's success, more than anything else, to me, difficulty may be a certain aspect of World of Warcraft's popularity in the past, but I don't really think difficulty really had that much to do with it. Because, I mean, honestly, when WoW was at its peak, I mean, there just wasn't that much, around. There wasn't that much else to really do. So, like, that's all you had. So you didn't really mind it. But the gaming community and industry has changed so much over the course of WoW's lifespan that WoW, honestly, is forced to change. And I think it comes down to that there just isn't that much of a journey in Warcraft anymore. And I think that may be one reason why people have been so, distraught at the past couple of expansions, is just you see WoW transitioning to more of a, black and white cookie cutter type, in parentheses, video game, air quotes. And I honestly think that's how the industry is becoming. Now, not in all cases, but I think it ultimately comes down to that, like, immediate gratification kind of thing, just, this is what I want it now, And I mean, you look at games like Call of Duty that just do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And although it works, so I don't necessarily blame, the companies for not changing it, because I mean, hell, it keeps making them money. But I mean, it's just the video game industry is just so much different than it was, 9 years ago. Uh, you know, you can't really compare vanilla to Miss Pandaria that much as people do. Like, oh, vanilla was the best. Well, for its era, it certainly was. But if you put vanilla WoW out on markets today, it probably wouldn't be that all successful. I mean, and I'm not literally talking about vanilla WoW like in a box. I'm talking about something like vanilla WoW. A game that plays like it in every aspect, is just because the video game industry has changed so much that old style no longer works. And that's why you've seen World of Warcraft change over the years, is because Blizzard has to change it. So I think perhaps more people have left the game simply due to the lack of immersion. Now, that's not to say that there isn't any left. I don't think that's the case at all. But, I mean, when you look at just, I was fairly young when I started playing World of Warcraft back in 2004. And I can tell you, I still have very, very fond memories. I mean, you would just, start a level 1 character, your first time ever playing World of Warcraft, and you wouldn't know what the hell to do. You'd just wander around. Perhaps you'd wander to an area with like level question marks and get your ass whooped. But that was okay, because everyone did it, because no one knew. And it was just an entirely different world that you explored. And, dungeons would last hours and hours, and you would get lost because there was no map. And it was just like, anything else, like if you really went there. And so it was like an immersion thing, it was really an adventure. It was really, truly a world to explore. And although that sounds kind of cheesy, it's true. And I think that was due to much of the success that World of Warcraft has had over the years. And I just think you don't see that as much. And even if the general content may be a little bit better, and WoW may be a little more cleaner and well thought out than it was, say, back in the day, clearly you see its popularity slowly declining. And again, for those people that say WoW is dying or anything like that, I don't necessarily like that terminology of dying. I think, yes, it would seem to fit that pattern, but the common misconception is that people think that it's just going to go from 10 million to 9 million to 8 million to 7 to 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 million, and then just reach 0 and the game's done. But that's not the case, because honestly, I'd say there's a solid 6.5, 7 million players that have been playing the game for so long that no matter how shitty the game gets, unless it gets so bad, that hell, I mean, they'll just play forever until the game just moves on to greener pastures and something else takes its place, which inevitably happens in the video game industry, or just in life. Everything has its golden era, civilizations, video games, people, whatever. Everyone has those moments in their life, and perhaps WoW's was the beginning of its life, and now perhaps it goes slowly to a downward spiral. But just as history will tell you, it may have another golden era, just above the horizon, just over the horizon. We may just not see that next golden era yet, but it may come back stronger than it ever has been. So we'll just have to wait and see what WoW holds in store, see what BlizzCon holds in store with this next expansion and everything like that. So, going off on a little tangent here, but I'm really tired. But anyway, so I hope you all enjoyed this WoW discussions video. I will be coming out with some more State of Affairs, some more Hearthstone beta, perhaps. With Ben's our first video together, so you'll get to meet him. He's a really cool dude. I think you guys will like him and everything like that. So without further ado, this is me, Noah, from Knights of 67, and I will see you guys next time.